Here.
That's all right.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you happen to be in the world watching our webinar today. This is the March edition of the ABA Broadcast Engineering webinar. We hold these things typically on the third Tuesday of each month and have special guests that come in and be with us from time to time. And one of the things we wanted to mention right off the bat, our genial co-host, John George, is not with us today. He's actually uh, installing a automation system somewhere down in sunny Florida, or that's what he said he was doing. He may be out on the beach. I'm not sure what, but he said that was what he was going to be doing, was installing a new automation system. The our webinar, as well as a lot of the things that we do with the ABA Engineering Academy, is actually underwritten by Max Connect Group, Josh Bond and his crew. This is a full service broadcast sales and service company. According to Josh, they sell everything from the microphone to the antenna, and they do installs and repairs and all. One of the big things about the Max Connect Group is his prioritized Wi-Fi system or cellular system. I suggest that you look him up on the web there. The site is actually on this slide. And this unit actually used prioritized cell service, which allows you to take these little units out and do high school games or college games. And when you get, 100,000 people in a college stadium and they all fire up their iPhones, it sort of makes the Wi-Fi go away. But in prioritized, it doesn't. You're sitting on a separate group of channels. So I encourage you to check with the Max Connect group and check that out. And when you do, make sure you thank them for all their stuff that they do. They underwrite not only this webinar, but also our engineering classes that we have. Those of you who are not familiar with our classes, we do classes several times a year for both radio and television. We've had a really good turnout. We've been doing these things now since my gracious, I think it's back in 2012 we actually started it, but it's open to anybody, anywhere. I think the furthest place somebody has actually traveled is we had a lady flew in from Alaska and took the radio class, and we've also had some people from Canada, but we have them from everywhere. So check that out on our website at the al-ba.com website. Today's guest is my good friend, John Bisset. John works with Telos Alliance, but he also writes articles for Radio World. And the most popular one that he does, obviously, is the Workbench. And so, to begin with, John, let me welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much, Larry. It's good to be here. Glad to see so many folks taking some time. We'll go over some things this morning. I hope will save you some money and save you some time, and maybe also some headaches. We'll take a look at those.
Okay. One thing I wanted to do is have you talk about how you actually got started in doing this workshop, the Workbench.
Well, it's a kind of a interesting quick story. I was on y'all probably remember Willard Scott, the weatherman on Channel 4.
Sure.
I was on his Bozo show when I was about 10 years old, and that bit me as far as, oh, I got to get into broadcasting. So anyway, ended up as an announcer, a DJ, a top 40 jock, and all of my friends were getting fired. And it was like, they never fire the engineer. So I changed my major from performing to engineering and followed a career into broadcasting. That led me to working at a number of stations in Washington, D.C. in that market. And that's where Radio World started. And I got to befriend the owner of Radio World, the creator of it, Steve Dana. And we did a trade out. I started a contracting business and I needed an office space. And he said, hey, if you write an article for me every issue, I'll trade you office space. So, hey, bartering is great, isn't it? We're in broadcasting, right?
That works.
So, so for a number of years, I started writing for Radio World, and he came up with this idea of, I want something technical because they've been doing. It was basically a newspaper, and it was all radio news, but he wanted to move more into the technical end, and so he said, "Come up with something, see what you think." And so started with a bunch of tips of things that I had done, and then talked to other engineers in the market. And next thing you know, the tips are pouring in. So it's been 30. I think we're working on 33 years now, Larry. But it's been a lot of fun. And a lot of really good friendships made, and a lot of good information being disseminated to the broadcast engineer.
I run into the same thing doing the ABIP inspections here in Alabama. I've learned that you learn more by listening than you do by talking. And so I go in and I see what other engineers are doing, and I've picked up some, like you, picked up a lot of good ideas, and I sort of learned that you may have been doing something the same way, a certain project the same way for 10 or 15 years, but you may find somebody else that's doing the same project but in a different way that makes a lot more sense. So you never, I mean, you never quit learning. That's one of the goals, of an engineer, is to be a lifelong learner, and you do that by watching and listening to other people. And the things that you publicize on the Workbench have been really, really. I think a lot of help and everything. I think you have a slide presentation you were going to use, so I'll let you start your presentation.
Okay, that'll be great, Larry. And speaking of learning, if you haven't been on the Telos Alliance website, I'd like to invite you there because there are a whole bunch of YouTube videos and a lot of really good. It's not sales stuff. This is just good, solid engineering information, and that goes for pretty much every broadcast manufacturer. If they're not doing YouTube videos and information on their products to help you get the most out of them, there's something wrong. They probably won't be around very long. But yeah, Telos has got a lot of good information on there. You could spend all day. So invite you to head over to our website at some point.
All right, you can continue now with your
Okay,
slideshow here.
let me go ahead and get us on here. Is that coming up?
That's coming up. As I said earlier, it's big time show business. It works.
Yes, sir. That's right. Very good. As we go along here, if you have questions or comments, just go ahead and shout them on out. Not a problem. This is really a give and take for everybody, and I don't want there to be something that comes to mind, and at the end, it's like, oh, gee, I can't remember what that was. So this is a quick look at our topics today. We're going to be talking about Workbench tips, but also about containers and a little bit of information on some Telos products that will be interesting. I saw this. This was really pretty neat. Filtrete, it's a 3M company. They make filters, air filters, and they also make the ones that go into air conditioning systems. And you want to freshen your studio air. This is a great way of doing it. Is by having these. Speaking of filters, if your station does not buy filters in quantity, consider doing that. You can pay $5 for a filter at Home Depot or Lowe's, but if you buy them in quantities of 10, they get down to a couple of bucks a piece, or even cheaper than that. So make sure that you take advantage of the quantity discount, because you will be going through filters, or you should be, in keeping your air conditioning running properly. I thought this was really neat. Now, this is a little old slide. You can see it says Entercom, but this was a really neat picture. These guys built a new office building, and they were, what are we going to do in the lobby? And you can go out and spend $100,000 making the lobby look beautiful, or you can go over to a Best Buy and buy a bunch of 60-inch monitors, and they have the USB port in the bottom so that you can change what the monitors say. and they can set these things up so if someone comes into the station and they want to welcome them, they can be on one of the monitors. The monitors normally scroll from the different formats and things like that. Just really kind of a neat idea. So let's look at wiring considerations. In this day and age, an Ethernet cable can replace that bundle of cables. And if you're not moving in the direction of audio over IP, I really encourage you to do that. TELUS has got some really good background information websites on our website on learning about how all of this goes. But it is just such a much better deal than pulling multi-pair cables all through everything. But if you've got tightly coiled or kinked cables, this was a neat idea that an engineer sent in to me. His wife wasn't real happy about it, but he had all of these cables that had been wrapped up for a long period of time and they were tightly coiled. Putting them in the dryer on this dryer rack for about 5 minutes caused the heat to relax the cables so that he could pull them all apart and actually get them coiled properly. I like this as a third hand. It doesn't have to be anything really fancy. What this engineer did was he glued a couple of XLR connectors onto a block of wood. You can see it was just an old piece of wood that was laying around there, but here was his third hand in soldering XLR connectors. And remember that pins 1 and 3 flip between the male and the female XLRs. One of the other things too is don't forget to put the shell on the XLR. I remember early in my career and even later in my career soldering these things, and you get a perfect solder job, and then golly, there you go. The shell is sitting over on the side. You got to unsolder everything and do it all over again.
We've all run into that. I saw one time at the NAB, somebody had actually made a block, and it was heavy, sort of like lead or something, but they had put a selection of connectors on there, XLRs, tip ring sleeves, and stuff that way, like you say, as a third hand. And I thought
Mhm.
that was a neat little thing. Well, one of the things that I've used that I like is and I don't know if they still make it, but it was a little thing. I think it was called a pan of ice. It was real small, a little
Yeah,
small
they
vise
sure do.
with a suction thing on the bottom. And man, that was invaluable to wiring things up. Even like DB9s, back when we used to do that, DB9s and DB15s to hold it while you were soldering, because it was just about impossible to do it without something that way.
It's really true. And the thing is, here is the saying, why not retire the soldering iron? That's pretty much what you can do now. If you're not working with uh, these cable dongles and an Ethernet cable, even if it's an audio analog audio studio, this makes things go so much faster. And when we talk to people about putting in Axia consoles and tell them they can do it in a couple of hours, they think we're lying to them, or what are you smoking? Because there's no way. I remember taking weeks to do a console install. And with these little cable dongles, they're just so easy to just snap in place, put the interconnect Ethernet cable, and away you go. And Larry was talking about the DB9s or DB15s, the logic connectors using a not a bot yet relay adapter is really helpful because, again, you're not soldering those little tiny pins. And yeah, Larry, you're right. The Panavice was great for that, but you also needed good eyesight or a magnifying glass so you didn't end up with solder bridges across those pins.
Sure.
This is a neat little idea. This company is called Mr. Label, and they are printable adhesive wire labels. And you can just enter that on the internet, Mr. Label. And oh, that's something I didn't mention to you at the very beginning. If you've got your cell phones with you and you want to take pictures of these slides, I'd encourage you to do that. That way you can come back. You don't have to write or scribble down the information. You can just take a snapshot of it and go ahead and look at it later on. But these come in different colors, and they're really the adhesive holds for a long, long time. They're very good labels.
there's nothing that will replace labeling cables. How many of us have always done the pull on the wire and ask your assistant, where does that go? See where the other end of that goes. So even with Ethernet cables, uh, I suggest, people label all those things so you know what they are, where they go, and you don't have to do the pull one end to see where the other end goes.
There you go. And Larry, you mentioned the Ethernet cables. Something we mentioned in the Workbench column a while back is using different color.
Sure.
The Ethernet cables now come in different colors, so you can have your business system on red, your automation system can be on blue, and your AOIP console network can be on green. But the idea is that you're splitting them up. The cost is the same regardless of the color. So talk to your vendor about that, because again, it doesn't cost you anything more, but it sure does make things easy for you.
The first time I
And
ever saw that, John, was in Atlanta at CNN. Uh,
uh,
Jim Bernay, who most of you know, Jim, he was the director of maintenance, and he gave me the backroom tour of CNN Center, and that's what they had done. You would see big bundles of red, big bundles of yellow, big bundles of green, and he said, "Well, that's dividing it up. Red
mm,
means one thing, green needs another, and yellow needs another." So and he said one of the things, especially in radio nowadays, sometimes if you have a separate IT department and a separate broadcast engineering department, IT people seem to think that, yeah, I can move this from one port to another to tidy up, but you can't really do that. You may knock the station off the air. So if you color code your cables going into the switch and maybe make red your program audio, and you never move a red one unless you
you
get with
talk
the
to the
engineer.
engineer, right?
That's right.
That's a really good idea. In talking with the cabling too, this Velcro cable holder, the problem with the plastic wire ties, especially with Ethernet, is that you can displace the wiring that is inside the Ethernet cable that can cause you to have some problems. You can't tighten the bundle down as tight as you can with a plastic wire tie with these Velcro straps. And plus, how many Velcro straps do you go through versus plastic wire ties if you have to cut to pull a cable out? Here you just unsnap it, pull the cable out, or add a new cable, and you're not wasting plastic wire ties. You're taking a chance of nicking the wire when you go and add another wire tie. And this is a close-up here of if it'll come along, there we go, of the slot that you can anchor it on. So let's take a look at some transmitter site tips. This is not trick photography. This is a true tower. And I got to hand it to the engineer that took the picture. God bless him that he would be willing to stand underneath something like that, because you look at things in broadcasting and it's like, how does this stuff work? You look at a tower like this and you wonder, how in the world is it still standing? It probably won't be for any, you get some ice on it or something like that, or a strong wind. But this is a good example of why you need to go to your transmitter site regularly, not once a year.
In our newsletter that we send out weekly, and yesterday's, I think it was, I actually had an article about developing a plan, maybe quarterly, to do a walk around and go out to
Great.
guy anchors and stuff that way and see what's there that's not supposed to be there, and things that have happened in rust. And obviously, when you do a walk around, you would see a tower that looked like that one.
This site, this was sold by a station. They were selling it, and we were asked to go in and do an inspection a number of years ago before the sale for the new owner. And when you go to the other side of the fence, it looks wonderful. And you come to the backside, and this is what we saw. And what was kind of neat about it was the purchaser actually was able to get them to knock some money off the price of the station, because all of the towers were like this. So he had to put up fencing around all of them.
Was that an
So
AM?
this is an AM, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I mean, the issue here is people going in there and touching the tower, getting shocked, doing some sort of damage to the copper, stealing copper or something like that. But this is just another example of something ignored. Nobody's gone up there. Nobody's walked around the tower site to see what's really going on, and this is the result.
I had an FCC inspector tell me a story one time, and he said it was true, so I believed him. He said he went to a tower and looked at it, and the fence looked good, but he noticed that one section on the back side, sort of like that one, had actually fell down. It was a wooden fence, and it fell
Mhm.
over. And when he got back up to the studio, was talking to the engineer and the manager. He said, "You need to fix your fence out there because one side of it has fell down." And the manager got all irate and he said, "Oh man, somebody must have done that because we were just out there a couple of days ago and everything was fine." And the FCC inspector spoke up and he said, "Man, y'all must really have fertile soil here because that oak tree is about 4 foot tall that's growing up through the tree laying down on the ground."
It's really something, yeah. You can't fool a lot of these inspectors, the ones that are left. That is very true. This is just a list of a few things that you really should have at your transmitter site. A spare fan for your exciter. Most exciters will not operate if they don't have a fan. So it's cheap insurance. Baby wipes or Klein cleaners. These are pre-moistened wipes that just help you get the grease off your hands or off of equipment or something like that. If you don't have LED flashlights or LED trouble lamps, go to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick some up. The trouble lamp that plugs into the wall is nice, but I found it was always busting. The bulb was always breaking, and you always didn't have a spare bulb. The LEDs just do the job. And down here at the very bottom, bubble wrap. This is for guys like Larry and I that when we got to get down on our knees under a rack or a transmitter or something, the little bubbles cushion your knees so you're not kneeling on the bare floor or on the metal of the transmitter. Also, if you slide a piece of this in the bottom of an equipment rack before you start working, if you lose a screw or a lug or something like that falls down there, the little sections of the bubbles will grab it so that it doesn't bounce off and get lost. So anyway, it's just another tip that can save you a little bit of time and also some anguish if you're down crawling around on a transmitter floor. So some caution around the transmitter site. Remember that the RF output of an FM exciter can burn you. Never remove an RF connector on the back of an exciter when the power is on because in addition to the shock hazard, you can actually damage the exciter. And when you're working at a transmitter site, work with a buddy. Enlist the PD or the GM. And this is really, really important. The PD and the GM may not have a clue of what's going on. I can't tell you the kind of respect I got when I brought my GM in the middle of the night to work with me while I was working on an RCA 20 kilowatt transmitter, and I turned it on and fire shot out of the top of that thing. And the GM ran out the door into his car, and I think he had to go home and change his pants because it scared the living daylights out of him. And after that, I was like golden. It was like, if you work on this stuff, man, man, this is amazing. But it's not only that to show the GM what you're doing, but also to have somebody there so that if an accident occurs, you've got somebody who can either call 911 or get you to a hospital or perform CPR, whatever the case may be. The other point here to the remote control, make sure you disable it. It was very frustrating to be working on a transmitter and hear the remote control clicking because the jock figured, well, it's off the air. Let me try to bring it back up. Fortunately, it was turned off, so he couldn't bring it back up, but you could still hear the relays clicking. And it was like, what in the world are you doing? And then also the old story, keep one hand in your pocket when you got one arm inside the transmitter so that you're not going to get across something and cause a fatal shock.
When you bring somebody to the transmitter, this is one thought. Make sure, although they don't know what's going on, make sure they know where the major disconnects are to the building. Power
Very good
disconnects.
idea.
That's they can't do anything else. But if you do get across something accidentally, at least they know where the main disconnect is to shut the power off.
And the same thing goes true with working on the AMs, AM ATUs, the antenna tuning units. Make sure the transmitter is disabled so when you're inside there cleaning components or whatever you're doing, somebody doesn't try to turn the transmitter back on for you. Okay, some ATU maintenance. Loose connections will cause heat buildup, and if you're a directional, that can cause your parameters to shift. So before you go start turning knobs on the phaser, check to make sure that all of the connections are tight. We had a jock who was a obsessive compulsive guy who wanted everything to look neat, and it was neat. He worked the overnight shift, but the overnight shift was in the transmitter room. He had a studio in there, and he would clean in between the records and all of that. And it was really nice. I mean, he made things look really, really nice. But one morning we came in, and the parameters for the directional array were all screwed up every which way. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. We looked over at the phaser, and all of the phaser cranks were all pointing at 12 o'clock. He was so obsessive about organization and neatness that he cranked all the cranks so that they all pointed straight up. And of course, that just messed the whole directional pattern out. But it's one of these things where you've just got to be very careful about before you start turning knobs or letting anybody else turn knobs. Make sure you know what you're doing. Tighten your
Especially
bolts.
on a phaser.
Oh boy, that is for sure. Tighten the bolts and nuts. That's where the looseness occurs. I've got every 5 years, maybe even 10 years, remove all the hardware and clean, and especially if the parameters are unstable. But I think once every 6 months or so, just tightening everything up, or once a year to tighten them, is a good idea. Marking with a Sharpie the location of coil taps or rollers on variable coils. The idea here is that if the coil falls off or if it burns off or something, you're not sitting there in the middle of the night trying to figure out where it goes. You've got a little mark on either side of the coil clip, and you can put the clip right back where it belongs. And then also, I'm sure Larry's seen a lot of this, plugging holes in ATUs to keep the inside nice and clean.
Keep the bugs out,
That's right.
snakes and
Don't
everything else.
There you go. That's right. And don't neglect that important generator. If you're fortunate enough to have a generator, make sure that it does work. It's there for your safety and for keeping the station on. And here's an example. This thing on the right, the orange, is a generator. But look at all the weeds and everything. And the problem was on the backside of it, the weeds had grown up and were actually blocking the ventilation fan grill work. In this particular case, this generator is being suspended on a frame above ground because it's in a floodplain. Before the engineer set the generator down, if you look there closely, you'll see that 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch hardware cloth that he put down on the frame. And the reason for this is the generator bottom is open. So if this is on a slab, it's not a problem. But if it's going to be suspended up in the air, you've got two problems with it. Number one, bugs and insects and mice and vermin can get inside, snakes, and find a nice home in there. But also the other problem is the battery is exposed. And a battery thief could come along and just reach up inside there and disconnect the battery and steal your battery. And you're going to wonder why the generator is not starting. So 1/2 inch hardware cloth that you can buy at the hardware store is a good idea. And get enough of it to cover the vents. Once again, this is not going to keep wasps and insects out, but it will keep mice. The mice will be able to squeeze through those little vents there, but not through the hardware cloth. So they're not going to be making a home in your generator. This is a neat thing to do at least once a year, but I like to see that it was done prior to the season when the generator was going to be needed, whether it was a winter season or the summer with thunderstorms. Squeeze every one of the coolant hoses, and while you're squeezing it with your thumb and forefinger, look for cracks. The hose should be very pliable. You should be able to just squeeze it and no problems. But if you see it cracking, that is a weakness in the rubber of the hose. It's going to burst. You don't want that to happen because you know it's going to happen when you need the generator. So make sure that you get the generator replaced with or that hose replaced. Here's another problem. What's hiding in your open pipe or conduit? Make sure that all of your conduits are sealed. This is just an open invitation for mice to crawl up inside there. And the problem is that if this say this pipe goes 10 feet, 20 feet, of course it's going to be in the middle where the mouse decides to chew on the cable and break the cable. So you're guarding against mice getting in there, but also in this case, rain can get in, and in a freezing condition, the rain could actually split, turn into ice and split the pipe or damage the cable. So you want to make sure that as you do your inspection, as Larry said, you do your walk around the building and the tower site, that if there is any exposure for openings where any critters can get in there, that you stuff them with steel wool. Use stainless steel wool. They won't bite through that. If you can use the plastic expanding foam, but mice will chew right through that, but they won't chew through the solid steel wool. Pests can hide anywhere. You see on the left-hand side, there's something back inside there. Well, on the right, the engineer found it was a raccoon, and he curled up on top of that nice warm exciter and breathed his last. Never know what you're going to find at transmitter sites. We're going to talk for a couple of minutes here about some useful tools, but before we do, I wanted to chat about some information about what's new at Telos. So we'll do a quick commercial. You might not know Telos invented audio over IP for broadcast. Other people have said that they did, but we have the patents actually hanging in our office up in Cleveland. And if you ever make it up to Cleveland, please come on by. We're on Superior, right by the lake, and we'd love to show you around. But the founder of Telos, Steve Church, came up with this idea of, hey, you know, computers are really getting popular, so why don't we use computer wiring and computer infrastructure, and instead of sending bits of computer data around, we change audio into those bits and we send the audio around. We have innovated innovated software containers for broadcast, and containers operate on Linux servers. This is nothing proprietary, it's open source, and it's very stable and reliable. And the thing that's neat about it is Telos is not going to stop making hardware, but all of the banks are using these container softwares, so it's something that is very proven, and broadcast is just kind of picking up on a good idea in doing this. So in coming up with this, these containers are little software packets, as you see there in orange. And we have our VX telephone system. We have your playout system that can be a wide orbit or RCS system, any of the other systems out there. The Axia console, also our Infinity intercom system, and Omnia audio processing. All of those are available now in container conditions, and these can be run on a container in the cloud or in a server that you can buy from Telos. So this is really the direction where things are going. We started out with a virtual console called the IQS. This was based after our IQ console, and it's used with a codec to be able to get your audio from one location to another. But then with the advent of Zoom technology and what we're talking about here this morning, how you're hearing me, we can provide remote monitoring and contribution on our Altus virtual console. and you can see looks just like a console, except it's on a screen, and you have your choice of using either a mouse or using a touch screen. We've got a number of these in service where people are using the touch screen as their surface, and it's really pretty neat the way it operates. We've got an Altus webinar coming up later this week, and I'll have my email up here in a little bit. And if you want to copy that down, if you can either go to the Telos site or shoot me an email, and I'll send you a link to the Altus Virtual Console webinar. You can learn more about it. But it's really pretty cool because it can run on a laptop, a tablet. It can even run on a smartphone. So stop and think about this. Your smartphone can be an audio console, and you can contribute to the system back at the studio site. What I'd like to do, if I can get this thing to operate, is give you 1 minute with Altus. This is going to blow your mind if you haven't seen this. Those are real operators really operating with this stuff. It's really pretty cool how it operates and how easy, especially for older engineers. We've had people question about, well, how about the older guys? How are they going to handle this stuff? And they actually do very, very well with it. They maybe one shift is all they need, and they're able to go ahead and move along. So
This has been really big in the pro audio field as well, John. The most all of the manufacturers of pro audio consoles actually have an app where you can actually run it off of an iPad, and it makes you can actually run the whole program, the whole show off of it if you wish, or you can use it to
absolutely.
do if you're doing checking on feedback problems and stuff. You can go up on the stage and do some gain settings with it. So I'm
Exactly.
glad.
Yeah. And Larry, that's really important because you can walk around with a tablet in your hand. They do that at our church. They walk around with a tablet in your hand, and you can adjust the levels of the mics or the settings, whatever. I mean, this is just it's never been done before. So it's really pretty cool. So let's look at some useful tools here. This first one is my favorite. For $20, you can buy on Amazon a smartphone endoscope. Now, I'm not suggesting that you look into an alternate career in doing endoscopies or colonoscopies or anything like that. But no, when you've got a problem inside a transmitter and you're looking for what is causing the problem, sticking that little camera down behind the tube or in the back of a network to be able to see where you can't see, I mean, it's invaluable. And for $20, gosh, I mean, come on, this is it's almost insane that it's this inexpensive. But it's something that for engineers, especially contract engineers that are looking at a lot of different radio stations, you never know when something like this will come in handy. Here's something that again isn't much money. It's under $30. It's on Amazon. It's called a Fluke Volt pen. Larry and I were talking earlier about making sure that the disconnect was thrown. A lot of times when breakers fail, even though the breaker itself is showing off, if the breaker may actually still be connected inside. And this fluke pen is an inductive pen that looks for AC. And if it senses any alternating current, it'll glow red on the end. So before you go inside equipment, you can check all of the circuit breakers, make sure that they're all indeed off. And you can also check around on wires that you're ready to touch to make sure that there's nothing there. A number of years ago, the TAB gave these, Texas Association of Broadcasters, gave these out to every engineer that attended their convention, which I thought was a really good idea because, again, something like this can save your life. A little bit more money is a Fluke IR thermometer. So you point this thing at whatever it is you want to measure the temperature of, and it'll show you what the temperature is in the little LCD window. But if you got a little bit more money, something even better than that, and that's called the FLIR, F-L-I-R, IR camera. This is a camera that plugs into the bottom of either an Android or a Apple smartphone, and it gives you the ability to measure heat. Here was a picture that Jeff Welton from Nautel took of me working at my computer, and you can see where the body is warm. It's showing red, and the idea is that as you're shining this thing around your transmitter building or in your studio, you can see overheated components like this one. Here's a circuit breaker that is about ready to fail. This was a picture that Jeff shared with me, and this breaker, I mean, they wouldn't have known about it until the thing caught fire and then took the station off the air. Here's an idea for a contract engineer. So you say 250 bucks, that's a lot of money. You could probably make that back in one visit to a station for charging them to go around and do a video shot of all of their transmitter equipment, the studio breaker boxes. And it's a good idea because this way it gives you a reference of, hey, everything's working fine here now. And maybe it's all green or yellow, but if you see anything red, there's a potential for a problem. So you're looking at something that will be a very useful tool for you. Jeff was telling me that he uses his whenever he goes and does an Autel install for the transmitters. He checks all of the circuit breakers for the customer. But you as a contract engineer could certainly do that, and it will give you some peace of mind knowing that everything is all right or finding a problem. It also works in shining it onto transmission lines. So if you've got rigid line and there's a bad bullet, it will spot that as well. I'd like to talk for a second about engineering protection as we start to wrap this up here. Using your camera phone to document everything. My attitude is you can't take too many pictures, but follow up compliance issues with a written memo or a letter to the GM. Put it all in writing. Don't just tell them. Larry and I were talking before the session began about the station will get fined, but there have been instances where the stations have turned around and either fired the engineer or tried to sue the engineer because of their lack of I guess just discipline in keeping things straight, even though they may have told the manager or the operations director about the compliance problem. When they're facing a $10,000 fine, believe me, they're going to be looking to pin it on somebody. So if you have something like this going on, make sure you put it in writing and then keep a copy of that correspondence at home. You just want to protect yourself. I'm not saying that everybody is doing this or everybody is going to come and get you, but being forewarned is a good idea. For contract engineers, before you begin any service with a radio station or TV station, walk through the transmitter and studio site with your camera and the GM or the owner. Point out any violations that you see. offer to compile an inspection in the form of a report. And again, this is something you will charge a fee for, so you're making a little bit of money for your time. But the point is, let the GM determine the priority of the repairs that you discover, and have that report given to them in writing, so it's understood. Okay, somebody's pointed these out to you. Now you got to tell me what you want to have fixed first, because a lot of times they'll just say, "Oh, nothing, just let it keep going." But you don't want to be hung up to dry if something happens with an inspection. And an example of that is my no tubes in the boxes. When I was doing contract work, I had a station out on the eastern shore of Maryland, and they had been through a bunch of different engineers, and they were off the air, and they called me, and I went out, and the manager came out with me to get me into the building. And it looked like it was a tube that was dead. And so we went ahead and pulled the tube, and he said, well, I've got all these spares. And there were probably 10 boxes of tubes that were stacked up along the back of the wall. Open the first one, it was empty. Open the next one, it was empty. Every box was empty. And what had happened was one of the previous engineers had not been paid, and he decided the way I'm going to get paid is I'm going to send all these tubes back to Econco and get the dud credit for it. Ethical, maybe not, but the point is, if I had been there by myself and the manager hadn't opened those boxes and seen that the boxes were empty, he would have blamed me and said, well, wait, I know that there were tubes in those boxes. What did you do with them? So again, it's not saying that somebody's going to do this, but just be cautious. You just want to be careful. And here's something fun for you all that have hung in here for as long as we've had this morning. This is a swag bag that comes from Innovonics, and there's 4 things there that come along with it. There's a neat little booklet and some information on the Innovonics products, but this little flashlight in the center, and it goes on your keychain, and the connector that will hook up your USB terminal to any kind of telephone jack or a telephone charger is really nice. And if you'd like a copy of this, all you need to do is write an email to sales@innovonicsbroadcast.com and tell them that you saw the Workbench webinar and you'd like them to send you the swag bag, and they'll put that in the mail to you. The Workbench has been sponsored many, many years by Innovonics. They're a great company. They make some really good products, and we really appreciate them partnering with us to provide you guys with a little flashlight on your keychain that will help to illuminate things when it's dark, as well as the umbilical there for the charger. If you're looking for more tips and tricks, every issue of Radio World, send the tips to me. That's my email. And if you want the link for the Altus webinar, send me a notice on that as well. Workbench is in every issue of Radio World, and if you submit something, either a picture or a tip, the credit is given you for SBE recertification. So if your certification is coming up and you've had something in Workbench, they will give you credit for that. If you're not subscribing to Radio World, it's free. Go to radioworld.com. And there is a button on the masthead there on subscribing, getting a subscription. You can either get it done electronically, or you can have the paper copy of the newspaper sent to you. Either way, if you're working in the industry, you're able to get a free copy of this, and it's a really, really good publication to provide information for everybody, engineers as well as program directors and promotions folks and general managers. And then if this program has been helpful, please let me know. My email again is listed here, and I'd like to thank all of you for your business over the years. I've worked with a lot of you, and I sure do appreciate both the friendship as well as the business that you've provided for me and for the companies that I've represented. I'm starting my 11th year at Telos now, and having a good time with it. These are good folks, and we just want to help you. If we can sell you something that will work and solve a problem, fine. But education, Telos is really big on that, as you can see, for them giving me the time to be able to present this to you this morning. So, and Larry, if we have any other questions, I'd be happy to address those at this time.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, John, and you and I talked about this before the program started, was the importance of redundancy.
Yes,
This
sir.
this is true in any type of business, but especially in broadcast engineering, is to have redundancy. If you can't really, sometimes you can't afford a spare transmitter or stuff that way, but at least have a way to bypass something that fails, because things will fail in a broadcast operation. And if you have a redundant piece of equipment that you can put in, or have a way to route around that. And that's why it's so important, as we talked about earlier, to have a station plan, plant drawing. We were talking earlier that the TV stations do this very well, where they make a block diagram of everything that the program travels through. You label that on. It doesn't have to be on anything expensive or fancy or anything. You can actually do it just on a spreadsheet, just draw it out. That will help you in troubleshooting. Plus, it will show you uh, things that are in the plant. And I've actually run into this, and I'm sure you have, John. Sometimes if you do a plant drawing and the station's been there for a long time, you may find a piece of equipment that is really not doing anything as far as uh, helping the efficiency of the operation or helping the broadcast operation program channel. And I suggest taking that out. If it's in there and it's not doing anything helpful, that's just another source of failure. So you can sort of take that out of the chain and not be worried about it. But by having a plant drawing, you can see what everything that your program channel goes through, whether it's radio or television, and that way will help you in troubleshooting and bypassing or replacing anything that may go out during a normal day operation. So redundancy is huge key. I shared with John before the show started, a good friend of mine, John Cooper, who is the front of house engineer for Bruce Springsteen. He says he has his main equipment, but he has backups for everything. And in most cases, he has backups for the backups.
Mhm.
He doesn't want to be the one that gets the ugly stare if the show stops, and it's something on his end that made the show stop. And that applies to broadcast engineering as well. You don't want to be the one that makes that the station goes off the air because of something that you did or didn't do. So I encourage people to do as much redundancy of the important stuff in the station as possible.
Those are all really good points, Larry. And something else I was just thinking about when you were talking about that, with the pictures and your camera phone. Um, sure, send them to me. I'd love to use them in Workbench. But when I was doing engineering as a chief engineer, we had a lunchroom, and I would take a snapshot and post it every week, every 2 weeks in the lunchroom so people could see things like snakes, like wasp nests. Just to give them an idea of what, hey, we know this engineer disappears in the afternoon. We don't know where he goes or what he does. And giving them an idea that, yeah, today I'm doing battle with the snakes, or I'm doing a battle with the wasps that have taken up residence. But even burned up components. If you've ever had a component explode in a transmitter, and you've got a picture of that, to let people see this, educating your staff is really important. And we all talk about, well, how do engineers get respect? I think it's for people to understand what you're doing. And yeah, you're not at the radio station all the time, but when you're not there, you're doing something else in another location. And with that in mind, if you do work in the middle of the night or on the weekend, call and leave a voicemail for your program director, your operations and manager, or the general manager. Let them know it's 2 in the morning and I'm at the transmitter site, or it's Sunday morning at 5 a.m. and I'm at the transmitter site because of this. Just wanted to let you know. This way, when it comes time to decide whether or not we're going to reduce the engineering staff of one down to none, it's like, I don't know. This guy keeps telling me about how he's here in the middle of the night and he's here on the weekends and he's running all over the place. You're not being a pest. You're letting the manager know what's going on. And as I've traveled around in sales, the biggest complaint I get from management is I have no idea what my engineer is doing. So keep keep your management informed, either by voicemail or memos, whatever it might be. The point is that they need to know what you're doing, and it will really help you as far as getting a raise, keeping employed, and just giving everyone a good feeling that, hey, this guy may not be here during the day, but he's here on call for 24/7. I mean, he's doing some wonderful things. So hope those tips will be helpful for you too.
Oh, sure, because the engineer is really the only one that's actually on call or there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sales is not, uh, programming is not. So that's something that he's the only one in the broadcast facility that's available 24, uh, 365 days a year. So
Yeah, Larry, I used to joke. It was like, I work a doctor's hours, but I don't make the doctor's salary. So, you know how the doctors are on 24-hour call.
that's
And
right.
that's really true for an engineer, that there's a lot going on, a lot of responsibility, and your management needs to know that.
That's exactly true. Here's a quick tip, and John, you can add to your list when we're talking about
Okay.
pests earlier, in ATUs and in transmitter buildings. Mothballs. We always kept a lot of mothballs, and we would put them in the antenna tuning unit. And actually, in transmitter buildings, wasps do not like mothballs, and that will help keep little critters out of your antenna tuning units at AMs and in your transmitter buildings as well. And of course, it doesn't smell good to the engineer either, but especially
Well,
the pests don't like it.
they don't, and they're real good for deterring snakes too. If you've got a snake problem, putting a few mothballs in the bottom of your equipment racks is a good idea. Um, Larry, that brings up one other thing. If you haven't heard about Mouse Magic, you can Google that. It's MOUSE MAGIC, and this is a little packet of peppermint, and it smells really, really good. It's better than mothballs, but it'll last a couple of months. And you scatter these little packets around your transmitter building, and the mice they will find somewhere else to go. They're not going to be there for whatever reason. They don't like the smell of peppermint. And the Mouse Magic is available at most garden shops. You can get it online. I believe you can also pick it up at the big box stores. But if you've got a mouse problem, that is a good place to go to eradicate it.
Funny you should say that. A couple of years ago, we actually had, for some reason, some mice got into one of our vehicles, personal vehicles, and ate up some of the hoses. And when we
Oh
took it
no.
into the shop and they found what it was, they said, "Yeah, that's quite often." And the reason they do that is the hoses, especially the fuel hoses, and all have uh, are coated with some sort of mineral oil like we used to put on our baseball mitts, and mice sort of like that. And he said, what you need to do is to put you some peppermint, ground up some peppermint, and throw it up under the where you park. And that'll keep if you've got that problem, it'll keep the mice away. And I hadn't thought about that till you said that's
Well,
and we did that. We took some old Christmas candy canes and broke them up and threw them up under the car.
Oh, that's really neat. Well, these guys came up with the idea and put it in pouches, and they're now selling it. They're probably millionaires, but it does work. It's a neat thing, and again, it does make the transmitter building smell nice too.
That's right. Well, John, we sure appreciate you being with us today, and we enjoyed all the tips, and they're very good and helps be a more efficient engineer in the broadcast industry.
Thanks so much, Larry, for
Yeah.
having me. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Sure. Our next webinar will actually be on in May. We're not going to have one in April because of the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, which is in Las Vegas, April 14th through the or 13th through the 17th. And so we will not have a webinar because of that. But our next webinar will actually be scheduled for May 21st. So make sure that you put that on your calendar. If you're not getting our newsletter, make sure you can actually go on the ABA website and click on and get the free newsletter that comes out each Monday morning. Again, a couple of things here: the NAB convention, April 14th through the 17th, and our next ABA engineering class will be for television, which is the week of April 8th through the 12th. And you can find more about that on our website as well. We will repeat our classes later on this late summer, early fall. We'll have another radio class and another television class as well. There's my information. If you need any information, L. Wilkins at al-ba.com. And the actual ABA website is www.al-ba.com, where you right on the front page is a link where you can sign up for our newsletter. If you're interested in our classes, all you have to do is click on the engineering tab, and it will bring up a lot of information about our classes and online registration. So we thank everybody for being with us, and we will see you again May 21st. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you all.